Welcome to the Culture of You, meaningful dialogue with me and my favorite people. All right, everyone, welcome to the Culture of You. And today I have one of my favorite people and poets ever. So today we have Barbara Fant, writer, performer, poet, community healer, community builder, community leader, voice. Just wait. I'm going to let y'all wait a few more minutes till y'all hear her voice. And she is a World Poetry Slam finalist. She has 2 poetry collections. I have them both. You should get them. A feature and most notably Button Poetry and Deaf Poetry Jam. Has received residencies in Havana, Cuba and Senegal, West Africa. She led informed poetry workshops for youth and adults who are incarcerated, those in community, adults in recovery, and survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence. She is a healing-centered engagement specialist and master of fine arts and poetry and a master of theology, mixing all of the good things in there. Founder of the Black Women Rise Poetry Collective, co-founder of the Singer Project, West African International Artist Residency, and co-founder of We Thrive Healing and Arts Collective. You're welcome, everyone, for having this person on this podcast today in National Poetry Month. Barbara Fant, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Doing real good. It's good to see you.
Yes.
And it's good to just be here vibing out, talking all things poetry.
Yes, absolutely poetry. So first things first, I asked you, it's National Poetry Month, so that was a no-brainer to ask you to come on and be on in this month for me. This is probably my 8th episode of the podcast, but what made you say yes?
It's you. No, I mean, seriously, like, why would I say no to anything you asked me to do? One, and
noted.
And then, yeah, like when, if you get an opportunity to come on to talk to a fellow writer, to talk to a fellow healer, community builder, why not? And so I really just wanted to learn more about what this was and to get a chance to talk to you. That's really all it was. So,
I love that. Yay. It's been too long. I haven't seen you. If y'all don't know, Barbara left Columbus, Ohio. She left us, but she left for bigger things. She's in LA and we are so happy for her. And we hopefully sent you off proper. But
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit for those maybe who don't know you. How would you define your vibe? I'll say vibe like in the world, in the streets. And then at work, how would you say you create culture, community and professionally? So I think vibe is the same as culture creating in the workplace and in the community, but how would you describe that personally and professionally?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think I would consider myself a bridge builder. So when I think about like my work in the world and who I am in the world, I would say my vibe is consistently somebody who's like a bridge builder. I'm constantly trying to pull together multiple different worlds and to see how they work. And that's probably because internally, I feel like I come from multiple different worlds and I'm constantly trying to blend those things in my own life. And so naturally, that's how I show up in community as well. And then I would say my vibe is probably like healing centered. Is that a good way to describe a vibe?
That's a good way to describe a vibe. You got more words for that?
Let's see. Okay, I'm going to use. Also, I think what's coming up for me is like colors. So I'm thinking of like yellows and oranges. And like, I think that reminds me of joy. So trying to like always show up in that way. And so I would probably describe my vibe as someone who tries to be a keeper and carrier of joy.
Ooh, that's like a new work title. Like I want to put that like on a business card. A
joy keeper.
And that's so great. Okay. So the next question I'm going to ask you is, when you think of your favorite self or like your full self, so you're a keeper of joy, right? And you think of your favorite and full self. I say favorite because best to me always feels like what maybe society has projected onto me, but your favorite self, when you love yourself, when you're with yourself, what are the characteristics or what's going on? Obviously you have some maybe yellow and on, but like, what other things are going on in your mind or in your world or around you when you're showing up as your favorite self, and how do you get to that place?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. When I'm showing up as my favorite self, I am my most centered. I'm my most grounded. I'm also my most authentic, meaning I'm able to show up fully in all of who I am. And I think in so many different parts of my life, I have to compartmentalize, probably like
Mm-hmm.
lots of people, right?
Right.
But I think for me, for years, I've always been like the person of faith, or the faith poet in a
Mm-hmm.
secular world, right? And so sometimes I was too spiritual for the secular world, but then I was too secular for the faith community. So I
Right.
think, but my best self is both of those things fully.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm able to show up fully in all of that, I think that is like my favorite self, right? And I'm my most at peace. So
Yeah.
things in my world have a steady flow. And they're like they're working together. I'm always doing something from a space of purpose and
Mm-hmm.
intention, right?
Yeah.
I'm living out that full intention, and I'm showing up fully. Because I think there's been times in my life where and you know this as somebody who lives in multiple different worlds, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can just be doing a bunch of things, and then we like are so busy and burn out, and then we're like, what the heck, why did I even say yes to all those things? What the heck was I doing? And you realize you weren't doing it from that centered intentional space.
Yeah.
You were doing it because you felt like, oh, I have to, you know what I mean? And what
Mm-hmm.
I'm realizing now as I'm getting older, that has come from this people pleasing space, that has come from
Yes.
this like what society was projecting on me space, right? So I think in my fullness, my most full self, I'm doing everything with intention, and I can answer why I'm doing it.
Mm. I love that piece. And that makes me think of discernment and just the
Yes.
ability to be able to be like, this is actually what I want to do. And I'm doing it because I want to do it. And I think there was a time probably in the beginning of, and I think in part in beginning of every career,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be the arts or like being public in my career. I've been writing, since I was a kid, but like
Yeah.
actually being public in my art space where I was like, oh, I need the exposure. I need to be known in this way. And now I'm like so strategic and like,
Yes.
do I really want to do this? And it's rarely ever about the money. It's
Right.
normally like, is this the right thing for me right now with the right people?
Oof, that's so good. That's so good. And being able to answer that for yourself and
Yeah.
realizing like, I don't owe this to anybody else. I don't owe an explanation to anybody
Mhm.
else. Like, I just need to, when I go home, it's me, myself. I need to be able to look myself in the mirror and be able to answer that for myself.
Yes. I'm just like thinking of all the things and I have FOMO. I have FOMO sometimes because I'm
Same.
like, I love people. Like I love the community. I love the connection. I love the energy and the joy and like the environment of art specifically. And there are sometimes when I'm like, that's a really good opportunity. But I told myself this month that I wasn't going to take any more things. And
Mm.
I promised that to myself. And my nervous system is like, remember what you said. And then like,
Yes.
and then my heart is like, but I want to be there. And I want to participate and I want to show up there. So that's as I get older, that is definitely something similar. I feel
Yeah.
something similar.
That gut response will always remind you, though. It's that first feeling that is always going to bring you back to center,
Mm-hmm.
and listening to that. So that's what I'm learning to do. I have FOMO too. Like, I mean, completely. Especially like, I mean, I've only been out here, it'll be 2 years in August, right? And I feel like the whole first year I was in LA, I was physically here, but my mind and my heart was in Columbus because I was trying to like, I
You
want
was
to be
catching
here.
all
I
the
want to be there.
videos.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but I have that. I completely resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
I have fear of missing out on lots of different things, but also I know what it's like to show up in a million different spaces and just say yes to everything, and then I'm not showing up fully.
Exactly.
When
And
I
that's
show
not
up
what they
there,
asked for.
You know what I'm saying? I'm getting paid, maybe getting paid, but I'm only showing up as a partial me. I can't even fully give myself on a microphone or to people in a space for a Q&A, or I can't give myself fully to the space. So I don't like that feeling. I don't like showing up halfway.
Exactly. So this brings me to my next question. Good lead in.
Okay.
All right. So I've watched you perform. I've seen you live. I've seen you on video. And there is this dynamic shift when you go into performer mode. And in the interest of not leaning secular, I will say that there's some sort of spiritual ancestral channel that you can see kind of happening as that. And people have said that similarly around there, but I know you're the voice for a lot of, nonprofit things, and you might just randomly hear your voice on the radio or like in an ad, and you're like, that sounds like Barbara Fant. But like, what is that shift? How is that happening in your body? Like, what do you know is happening in that space? And as you've honed in on that, not necessarily persona, but that performance persona or that performance energy, what does that look like for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when I started performing, I didn't know what my voice was going to sound like on the stage. I really just wanted to get up there and like do something, And when I found Black Pearl Poetry and I met It, I ended up getting on an open mic and haven't left the stage since I was 18 years old, And I had no clue. Like I didn't have a real voice, I don't think, at that time. And one of the things It used to say to me all the time is, you have to go and listen to other voices so that you can know yours. And so that's what I did. I would go to like 4 or 5 open mics a week, because at that time in Columbus, you could go see poetry like 4 or 5 nights a week.
Yes.
And I was there, and then I started slamming. And I think when I started slamming, it started helping me to hone my voice too. And I started writing from an even more authentic space.
Wow.
And when I started writing from an even deeper and more authentic space, and I started to resonate with the fact like, oh, this is healing for me. This is cathartic. This is doing something in my body. And now it's doing something for me to not just get it out on a page, but to get it out on stage. I started using that energy like on stage. And so I think it just comes from me, like a release and me getting something out of my body. So I think that's probably like what the energy is, it comes from that, it's coming from a deep space, like what I'm writing, but I worked to get there, right? I worked to get there. That wasn't something that just automatically happened. But as my writing shifted, my voice on stage shifted.
Ooh. Well, add your lived experience.
My lived experience, yeah.
You have more living. You lived more, and then
absolutely.
You tell. I mean, it's not guttural, but it's like you come from a different place. Deeper you go within yourself, living. Yeah. And like I always say, like I write to heal, but that there's something about the witnessing and the community aspect that is like enlarging on like a bigger than me scale.
Yes. I agree with that. And I always said that I write to heal too, but now I'm looking at it, and I love that kind of right to witness. But I'm also looking at it now as like, oh, I am a storyteller in a way that I never saw myself. I actually never really saw myself as a storyteller. And I'm just now realizing like, oh no, I am a storyteller and a person who is a holder and keeper of stories, right? And so I'm stepping into that a lot more fully too, and realizing like, hey, like people aren't going to know these stories unless we, the community, tell them and bring them forth. And so I'm looking at my writing a lot like that lately, as of late, and it's shifting and changing my voice again.
Barbara Fant with the griot energy. Griot energy. And then like I feel like griot an elder. And even though I'll
Oh my
never see
goodness.
myself as an elder, I feel like that starts to come down. I'm like, oh, I feel like those are synonymous, like griot, elder. Wait, just 40.
But no, for real. It is so funny because, you know, it's funny when you got poets that come to me like, oh yeah, you an OG. I'm like, I'm no, huh? What? You know, like, and it's like, it's funny, you know what I mean? But like I said, I've been at this work since I was 18 years old, you know, and I did not slam on a youth scene. I didn't grow up in that. I was a young person slamming on an adult scene.
Wow.
You know, so there were folks who came up around me that I slammed with, who slammed in Brave New Voices, who slammed in Cup C and all of that. But I never did that. We didn't really have that in Columbus, Ohio. So I was straight on the adult scene. So my voice probably also was cultivated by folks who were 10 plus years older than me. You know, I had to come, if I was going to beat them in the slam, I had to come with it. You think about, I'm like up against the Braswells, Kim Braswell, you know, Burnell, Bristol, you know what I'm saying? Will Evans. I was slamming against Will, like, you know what I'm saying? To get on teams. Like, who does that? Like, you know.
On purpose.
Like, I signed up to go do that. Like, huh? You know?
Oh, and while we're here for this moment, just in a moment of reverence and honor and homage to Isid, do you want to say anything about Isid?
Sure. I mean, I can say so many things, but Isid is a legend, you know, and he cultivated my voice. I literally would have never stepped on a stage had it not been for him. You know, I ended up sitting next to him randomly at Black Pro Poetry in 2006, I think, you know, and it's a funny story, but I didn't know who he was. I randomly ended up sitting next to him, and then they introduced like the godfather of poetry coming to the stage, and then this old man who's next to me gets up and spits this fire poem, you know what I'm saying? And it comes and sits back down like nothing ever happened. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Like, what in the world, you know?
We're just gonna act like that didn't happen.
We're just gonna act like that didn't happen. For real?
Sir?
He said, oh, thank you, sister. Thank you, sister. I appreciate that. And then, you know, he invited me to New Harvest Cafe the next day and asked me if I was a writer, you know, and if I'd ever shared. And I was like, nah, I've never shared, but I write. And I met him at New Harvest Cafe with several other folks the next day and did my first open mic. And I haven't left the stage since that time. And he's consistently been a mentor, a father when I needed it, a friend. And he's always gonna hold a deep, special place in my heart. So thank you for leaving space.
Yeah, the community is mourning his loss, and you know, we know that means he gets to go and be the shape and the size that he already was in human form and spirit form. So we are grateful for him as an ancestor, and grateful for him in mentoring and fathering and being a confidant to you and a supporter and an amplifier of you. And so we see the fruits, you know, we talk about the fruits, and that's beautiful. That's a beautiful moment. I definitely wanted to, I actually didn't have that in the notes, but that just made sense to happen right now. So moving on appropriately to the next question, poetry as a healing mechanism. You say, let me get this quote right. I don't want to quote you wrong. I pray in the form of poems.
Yeah. Like poetry is prayer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that comes from being, you know, when my mother passed, I was 15, right? And my father was going through some things. It was just a lot happening, right? And I was just like, I need to go to counseling, you know, I need therapy, you know? And my dad was like, you're not going to therapy, you're going to church, you know? And that was his way of handling things. But I didn't know how to communicate to God. Like, I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to talk about what I was experiencing. So I started writing. And what I would do is I would go to church and I would take notes on the sermon. and then I would go back home and write those into a poem. And that became my way of like processing what the pastor was even saying, right?
Yeah.
And then I started writing to God. I was like, well, I can't really talk to people, so I'm going to write it out this way. I'm just going to like, this is how I'm going to communicate. And literally that's what it was for me. So writing for me started as this journey of prayer and as a way to process what I was really working through. And so it still carries me to this day. I don't journal. I've never been a person who journals. I have a hard time keeping a journal. Actually, I've tried many times and like, it won't happen. Like the only thing that comes out are poems. Like I just end up writing a poem. So if I challenge myself to write a poem a day, that's cool. Like I could do that. You want me to journal every day?
It will be a poem.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
So for me, even now, like talking to guys, sometimes if I have a block or if I'm like, I really am working through this thing, it's just not working, like I write. And it's still my way of communicating to God.
Yeah. On the move, I had to like learn. That's so beautiful. I had to learn how to like maybe put it in my notes because I might be on the move. And I just was like, I had to get away from the perfection of it needing to be a finished product and start being able to like write whatever was coming. And I wax poetic even in like facilitating or like, you know, and that's just what you are. Like, they're like, that was really poetic. And I'm like, okay. Like, right. This is a keynote about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a poem.
That's right. That's right.
But then like leaning into, so it sounds like you like internally process. And I love that you were finding a way to process kind of those notes and make it make sense and understand it. And then also like communicate with God in that way. And then how did that lead into like trauma-informed care and like healing? Like you're a healing centered engagement specialist. Like that's a very specific title. How does that turn into that?
Yeah, that's just a certification.
Okay. Cool.
But shout out to Shanjan Ray, who started the Flourish Agenda in Oakland, California, whose training I went through by way of, LA County. So thank you for that. But, honestly, I think about too, like some of my first jobs, right?
Yeah.
And really my first job in Columbus, check this. So it said used to take me everywhere.
Okay.
Right. And I ended up going to this school with him one day, and he had It Said in the Advance Party, which was his group.
Okay.
So Frida Ayodele was dancing with him, and she worked at this arts organization and was like, hey, what are you up to this summer? And I was like, looking for a job, So she was like, come to the office, next week and do this interview. Had no clue what it was for. And it ended up being this organization called Art Safe, Art for a Child Safe America, where we went into schools and youth correctional facilities teaching art as a form of healing.
Come on.
Right. And so I ended up getting that job as an artist assistant. And the lead teaching artist was Lauren Iman. Shout out to Lauren, who works at the museum, who's known me since that time, since I was like 19 years old.
Okay.
And I was her assistant. And we used to go into Scioto Correctional Institution every week, teaching art as a form of healing. Wow. And we ran summer programs. And so she's like, she won't say this, but I'm going to say this. She was really like my first teacher. In that space. So she taught me really the art of facilitation and the art of doing workshops and how we can use this work that's already healing informed in practice, right? And share it with other young people so that they could write through their trauma and create through their trauma and paint through their trauma to get to a place of healing. And that's what we did. I mean, back in those, I'm sounding like I'm old saying back in those days, but back then, we did have like, I think we had a DVD. I don't think it was a VHS. It was a DVD player. And we used to bring in like HBO deaf poetry videos and just let them watch. And then we would do prompts based off of that. And these are young people who are incarcerated.
Yeah.
So I think my journey even started then. So I do consider it such a gift to have been able to like randomly be in that space, because
Yeah.
fast forward over 15 years later, I'm still doing that work,
It's like
you
that
know.
divine gift that's like Barbara. And like it's just handed to you. Yeah, that was for you
you
specifically, some
know,
divine timing.
isn't that wild?
That is wild.
It's so wild. So to still be working and teaching art as a form of healing, and you know, specifically mass incarceration spaces, it's
Yeah,
just like, man, it's something. It's something.
that's
So I
love.
don't even remember what the initial question was, but I know it took me back to that
Nope,
space.
you answered it
Okay, good.
perfectly.
Okay.
So let's shift. I love knowing these things about you and love knowing these connections, and it's all the pieces make sense now. Because I, kind of came onto the scene really in that space in like 2012.
Mm,
Because I came back here to get my master's at Ohio State, and I was still educational policy and leadership. So I'm a math nerd,
yes.
math degree, undergrad, and then educational policy and leadership. And then I was like, I need somewhere for my thespian, like
Yes.
artist self to go. And so I love that the open mic scene was what it was. I also did some performance arts, I do some improv
Yep.
comedy and drumming and all that kind of stuff. But Columbus
Yes.
was so loving to me. And they always
Mm,
made me feel like I lived here. I've been here. And
mm,
I love that about Columbus. But I want to move into the community space. And when you think about like community healing, I think the question that I want to ask you is,
mm.
do you have best practices? Like I know for a while it was like you were just kind of hanging on the trails. They said was taking you around. And then you were like, this is cool, meet new people, cool job, help people, help all these people probably that, the numbers stack up. But like, when did you start to be like really intentional around that and
Mm.
start to realize like, oh, this is my gift, and let my gift make room for me, and how can I be intentional about creating these community spaces?
Ooh, that's really a good question. I don't know. I don't know if it's when I realized, I don't know exactly when I realized it. I think maybe when I realized I had something to offer
Hmm.
that was um that I could offer something more than just what I'm doing on a stage in that
Hmm.
way. But that like what was happening in these open mic spaces, what's happening in these workshop spaces is that culture is being shifted and people are connecting in a different way, right? And
Yeah.
so I think I realized when I had somewhat of I'm not going to have the best word for it, but not platform, but like or ability to connect people. Like
Hmm.
that I came from multiple different worlds, and that I knew
That
people
plug
in all these
energy.
different
That's that plug
plug
energy. You got the
energy.
griot energy. You got the plug energy. More
That's
of that.
so that's so funny. I appreciate that. I don't
Yeah.
know. I just realized like, oh, I have multiple worlds I can bring together in
Hmm.
multiple different spaces. And you know, I was at the foundation for 7 years. I was at the Columbus Foundation for 7 years,
Yeah.
and then realized like how many folks, I saw filtering through there, how many
Hmm.
people wanted to connect, how many people wanted to build. And I could watch and see how these connections were being built. And then I could say, like, oh, I have that in me. Like I can do
Right.
that. Like, and so I started realizing that,
Hmm.
and became more of a convener, I would say, of spaces. And I'll just go back to that word like bridge builder, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure.
Yeah.
So this is the last question I'll ask. So expound
Mhm.
as you like. But
Okay.
there's a lot of collectives. So you have the Black Woman Rise Poetry Collective and the We Thrive Healing and Arts Collective. When I think about like collective, it's definitely different from like it's an intentional space. It may have specific demographics that are being, or diversity dimensions that are being like, focused on in those
Yeah.
spaces. What is your, like, you're in these spaces, how does this go from idea or vision to fruition? And
Mm,
like, what is your vision in creating these spaces to like, what need is that meeting? And what is your
mm,
vision for us on a, like on the scale that you're doing it now, but then
mm.
further out?
Oh, I love this question. That's so good. So the Black Woman Writes Poetry Collective, that became a thing.
Mhm.
It wasn't a thing. I had no vision for that. It wasn't a thing. It was literally during COVID, and I wanted to hold myself accountable. I didn't want to not be writing during those
Right.
months. So I was like, hey, how can I reach out to folks? So I reached out to like 13, 14 people and we're like, hey, y'all want to write a poem a day with me? Okay, great. And like hold each other accountable. That's really what it was, right?
Right. Writing buddies.
Really writing buddies. And then what happened is folks didn't want to stop. They wanted to keep going after 30 days. They wanted to like still do, share resources and still edit and like, let's communicate, let's convene, let's do this, let's do that. And then the opportunity came up for us to do a show at the Lincoln, and it became something. I had to name it something because it was like, oh, we're doing this show now. Now it's a thing,
That was
and
phenomenal.
then, oh, thank you so
phenomenal.
much.
I got to see it virtually because all the tickets were sold out, but wow. Wow.
It was something, and we didn't know what it was going to be. It was just something, and then it was, Freedom a la carte. And then this organization, you know what I'm saying? So folks started wanting to contract with us and do things. And then it became a thing. And so I think for me, I'm just now realizing that there has, like, when you have vision, you also need to have somewhat of a strategy.
Yeah.
And so I had to almost reverse engineer like that collective to figure out exactly what it was going to be and what it can be. But I think to answer the question around like what is my hope for like all of these spaces is I want to create a space for people to like heal and thrive and be their best selves, right? And so even back to the other question you had asked earlier, I was thinking about offering space and like platform for other voices, right? Like how can we be carriers of, or just holders of giving space for people for their voices, to be heard as well. Like how can we do that? And so those are things that I'm constantly thinking about. Like how do we get more voices heard?
Because once you're like a steward of that, like once you move from like, oh, this is a place where I got free, or this is a place where I healed. It's like, of course you want to give back. And of course you want to give back to people, especially that have similar lived experiences as you. But then it's like, what is the responsibility here? Like, what is, and that can have some weight to it, but like, what is the responsibility here? And it's like, it's in love. Like the minute it's not in love, I'm going to be like, wait, let me check my footing here, Right. But like, if this is in love, like what is my stewardship look like to the gift I was given by somebody else?
Yes.
And then the giving of it.
Yes. And what's my responsibility? Like there's so many people who showed up for me and who took me under their wings. It said was an incredible impact on my life, but so is Will Evans, right? So is Tiffany Smith.
Yes.
These folks showed up in my life and were like, I got you. and they used their stage to give me space.
Yes.
And to tell me to show up in my fullest self. And that's what I'm trying to do for other people. That's what I want to do for other people. So when can y'all come to LA to perform? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like wherever I go, folks is coming with me. And I think that's what it's about.
Shout out to Tiffany Smith. She made all of us cry. That poem, do you ever just turn it on and be like, man, I really had that impact on somebody? Wow.
Tiffany is, I
that
can't.
Poem.
Tiffany is, she's one of my heroes. Like she is, and I'm blessed that I get to like call and talk to her and just let her know, like, I love you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she really is she's like a hero for me. Yeah. And when I stepped on the scene, she was like legend on the scene, you know. She had stepped away, but she was legend, And she made space for me. And she always makes space for me.
I love that.
Always. You know?
That's the gift. And that's, I think, what the responsibility winds up being is like, how can we build capacity and space within ourselves? But then how can we keep giving and creating space for others?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think with the collective, what I've always wanted to do is have collective vision. Like, it's not just mine. You know what I mean? It's everybody else's too. Y'all show up because y'all want to show up. You know what I mean? And it's our collective vision that helps really heal and elevate each other. It's that collective piece of it. It's not just from the individual.
Yeah, and I'll take it for Columbus. To me, it's where poetry became home to me, you know? And so like there's nothing like, you can't tell me that Columbus didn't raise the best poets. Like, you can't. It's real. Some great poets. It's some great poets, but as a collective, it's some really magical beings, for real.
No, for real. Like, they have made crazy noise on a national stage. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, Hanif lives in Columbus. Hanif is from Columbus. Come on. Maggie Smith is from Columbus. Like, you know, Will Evans is from Columbus. Like, it's crazy. You know, folks don't even, like, Kim Braswell, she don't ever talk about it, but like when IWIP started, when the Individual World Poetry Slam started, like she placed like 7th in the nation.
Just another day for her.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and this was like years ago. This was before like folks was even on it like that, you know? So yeah, Columbus has something special. We were just talking about that on Instagram. Somebody put up a post about leaving a Broken English show and just talking about how special like the Columbus poetry scene is. And I'm like, nah, like that's real on so many levels. Columbus has something special.
And I'm like Jugga LeVert. I'm like Scott Woods.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like The Nest. Like, come on.
The Nest, I mean, at that time it was Black Pro Poetry that Ed hosted, then Will took it over. Then when that ended, we did Writing Wrongs. Writer's Block was the longest running open mic in the city.
Yeah, it just ended a few months ago.
Forum. Yeah. Poetry Forum, The Nest. I mean, like so many special. I mean, and then $2 Radio started doing things. Gramercy Books started doing things. Like there's just so many. It's special. You know, it is special. Like the stuff that happened in those rooms. The folks that came through the city that helped even cultivate our voices, like seeing features, you know what I mean? I remember Will bringing in folks from other states to come and like just talk with us. And Sonia Sanchez in our room, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I'm like, Ciara Freeman. I'm just thinking about like all the people.
That's
Kendrick. Ohio. I mean, that's Ohio. We give it to Cleveland. We give the love up for Ohio. You know,
you can name a million people. You can name a million poets who have touched the work, our lives. I'm even thinking about, and I will speak his name because some folks think about, they can't talk about him. They can't talk about activism without him, but I can't talk about poetry without him. And it's Marshawn McCarroll, who had a crazy impact on so many of our lives, but especially
what a powerful dynamic force he was.
And Marshawn was just like, I mean, Marshawn was brilliant, and he had been brilliant like in high school. Like him and his brother, his twin, used to come to like open mic, and like just sit there. You know what I mean? Like he's left such a powerful impact on my life, personally. So, but he is part of that poetry community.
And then like comes a time too, like I did my latest book, and it was nuanced and it was complex. We got books. But the latest book was Fire Poetic Memoirs of a Movement. And I really did the cathartic writing healing process for the 2020 and 2021 racial uprising,
Mm.
social justice movement. It had been going on. Like, let's not, and
Mhm.
say Marshawn, like it had been going on. And I think of,
Mhm.
Aramis and
Oh yeah.
Miss Adrian Hood and like,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hannah, and then you think about
Absolutely.
like Amber
Amber for
and
sure. Yeah.
when you think of all of them, and like Katie Smith had photos, and so we
Yeah.
wound up having Devin Shaw like drum,
Oh
and I
wow.
did like a 20-minute photo
Devin,
reel.
a poet. Devin's a poet
A
too. Yeah,
poet.
yep. Yep.
Everybody, we all out here. It's small, but it's like a very large community. And like he was drumming, and there were 20 minutes of just photos of
Mm,
all Columbus social
mm.
justice folks. And then
Wow.
we had dancers from
Oh my
Ohio
gosh.
State and the Lincoln Theater Incubation Program. And it was like just to see, because I had them come in there. I was like, y'all ain't paying to get in. Y'all, this group of y'all that do the on the ground, boots on the ground work, like y'all come and just get this love, right?
Yeah.
And so like they
Yeah.
were front row, and like
Mm.
it was one of the most beautiful things. I had to like, I was watching kind of from the balcony,
Oh wow.
because I came down and I had, a set, and I had a guitarist and I had backgrounds. Like it was like a nap, a protest, you know what I'm saying? It was all kinds of
Wow.
stuff. And there comes a point when the writing has to match the times. And that's Nina Simone, like that
Oh yeah. I
it
just
all
said
has
that
to
yesterday in an
match.
interview. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Who was you
Absolutely.
interviewing with? What you doing?
It was my it was my MFA program. It was Antioch. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
I got asked that question about like, I don't even remember what the question was, but about like something about what does it mean to be an artist in these times? What does it mean to be a poet in these times? And I was like, well, Nina Simone told us we should be reflecting the times. And that
Yes.
if we're not reflecting the times, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
And that goes back to like upholding community and
Mm-hmm.
being, carriers of history and culture bearers, like that's the work we should be doing. That's the work we have to be doing. Like if we're not
Mm-hmm.
reflecting the times, if we're not bearing witness, right, to what's
Right.
happening and documenting, what are we doing? And that's another way to build, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
that's the other way we're healing in this space, is by
Yes.
bearing witness and reflecting back to the community exactly what we're living in.
Hmm.
You know?
Well, I'm going to let you turn the tables. That was a perfect stopping point for the questions, but I'm going to let you turn the tables for one thing. This is one thing that I do, and it's one of my favorite things to
Ooh,
do. So I flipped the seat and I
okay.
ask you, and I'll give you a second to think about it. But I want you to give me a scenario. Um, we're very similar minded. So I'm curious what I'm going to do that you didn't do or anything like that. But you give me a scenario, and it could be imagined or accurate, and you can change names for the sake of amnesty, right? And you tell me a scenario and you ask me what I would do. And then we'll go revisit the scenario and talk about what you did or would do if this is an imagined scenario.
Oh my goodness. What? Okay.
It's called the situational hot seat.
Situational hot
seat.
seat. Okay. It has to be something that I did. It can't be something somebody else did, or it has to be something I did.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about something that someone else did, obviously change the names appropriately, but you can tell me that, and then I'll tell you what I would have done, and then you tell me what you would have done.
Okay.
If that's the route you take.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Okay. All right. Okay. This is funny. I don't know if this is funny or not. It's not funny, but I'm thinking of a scenario because I'm just wondering what you would have done as like a healer, historian, culture bearer, that kind of thing. So there's a open mic that was like going regularly. Situation happens where the space all of a sudden closes. Host is nowhere to be found. Folks show up to the space, they can't get in, you know. And we have no clue like where the host is. Finally get in touch with the host. They left the state. They're not coming back, right? So now it's like, oh crap, what do we do? Like we have a national scene that we could hold. Like there's all kinds of poets who want a space to share their voices. Your partner looks at you and says, you're the person to do this. Like, what are you going to do? You have to make a decision. What do you do?
Oh, there was a scene. I had a situation similar to this kind of happen. And what I would do now is different than what I did then, I think.
Okay.
What I did then was make some phone calls, and I didn't have capacity to do it. And so I didn't want to do it halfway. So I didn't. Now, the first thing I think I would do with the information and the lived experience and the trauma-informed care and all that I have now is there would be some like intentional repair or healing sought out from that situation. Like a space doesn't just close. Somebody just leaves town without some backstory and some context. So I think before I would do anything, I think there would need to be maybe a community meeting, or maybe like the original curators and producers, or the people that had some like back of the house knowledge. I need to have a conversation, because if the truth is, I wouldn't want to take on anything if people had a certain taste in their mouth, or a certain like connection to something bad that had happened. I would need to have more information before I go putting my name on that. And if there needed to be community repair, then we can move about that transparently. Forward-facing messaging is one of the things that gets organizations, people, all of that in trouble. And when people are like, how do you decide what you say on social media? Like, is it branded? Is it always branded? I'm like, this is why I started the podcast, to have conversations, because I don't think that social media has the bandwidth to hold nuance and complexity.
Right.
And we are humans, and we are messy. And sometimes people are leaving because of a personal situation, and that can be explained. We're sometimes so scared of saying the hard thing or acknowledging, like, we're going to pause. Yeah. We're going to pause in reverence of the end of an era, or the end of something beautiful that has happened, and we're going to regroup. Yeah. And we'll let you know. And in the meantime, like, have some slams, have some open mics in your garages. Like, we're going to come back to it, like get to writing, because it's going to come back around, and we got to figure out who the right person to carry this forward is. Right. Yes. So that to me is a step that we miss. And then we go, like, we feel like the pandemic really helped me with the slowing down. Like, we feel like we have to move on. Yeah. And like, we can't move on if we don't heal from it. We'll just repeat the same mistakes. Right. And the wound is not healed. And then the community is just coming in there, and then we're doing poetry from a wounded place. We don't want that. We don't want that. So like, that's what I would say about it. And I think now I also know at 40 that the get somebody else to do it is such a really beautiful thing, because I think there is the truth that the ship is always going to sail. That is some of the best advice. Whether I'm on it or not, the ship is going to sail. Right. And do I think that there are some times when maybe it's a missed opportunity? Maybe, but that doesn't mean that's the last opportunity that's gonna come for me. And I think that scarcity mindset can get us wrapped up in some things that we can't get out of. And I've seen people want to get out of stuff. And I just don't ever want to get caught up in something that I'm like, I feel obligated to do it, because then I might be coming from a space of resentment. And then it's not with my full heart. It's with a part of my heart. And I'm like questioning my decision. I'm questioning myself. I'm coming in like from that space, and that's not grounded and full.
Right. That's so good. That is so good. And I think too, that's something that we're not really told how to do. When we're in community, right, is that I know coming up, it was like, well, if you don't do it, who's going to do it?
If not now,
if not
when?
If not you, then who? What's going to happen? And it took me a long time to undo that. Yep. That's a lie. That's actually not true. There's actually tons of people who will do this. There's actually tons of people who are capable of doing it. There's actually tons of people who want to do it, right?
Yes.
So I don't have to do it. It's going to get done. If it's something that needs to happen in the earth and it's supposed to happen, it will get done. And it's okay to pause and take a moment to find the right person to be able to do it. It is okay. You know,
that's a word for y'all. I don't know if y'all know that, but you just gave us a situation that just gave us a word for everybody. And I just hope everybody just pauses. Just pause.
Just
take
pause.
A moment.
Just
a moment
pause.
with
Take
it.
a moment and be intentional. I have to remind myself of that, like, because that's a cycle that I can get like wrapped in, like, oh my gosh, like I have to. They said, who else is going to do it? That's not true.
Like, what is time even anymore? Like, it'll get done, or it won't, and it'll be fine.
And y'all gonna live.
Look at everybody. Look at everybody living or dying. Like, look at everybody just existing,
right?
In form or in ash. You know, like, I don't know.
Right. But it will be okay. It will be all right.
That's a word for all of our nervous systems. This has been so delightful. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Any words for the listeners if they've stayed on this long?
Oh my gosh. If you have, thank you so much for listening. Just thank you. And
where can they find you?
Oh yeah. Y'all can find me on IG and Facebook and Twitter. It's at I am Barbara Fant. At I am Barbara Fant. And then barbarafant.com is my website. And I do put out newsletters. I'm trying to be better about that. So I'll be doing that more often. And then you can find my book on Amazon or at Sundress Publications, which is my publisher.
Yes, it's a good one. Yeah. I got it. It's a good one. Of course. As soon as it came out, I was like, give me that.
That means so much. It's something to write something. It's another thing when people are actually buying it and they reading it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's a whole nother, you know? So thank you.
Have you thought about going in the studio for some of these?
I have.
You need that voice. I'm like, I'm reading this and I'm sure it's nice how I'm reading it, but I really want to hear Barbara's voice on this.
What? Okay. I was going to work on like a audio version of it. And then I started playing around with some music stuff. So I'll probably be doing both. Yeah.
Yay. I'll be right there to listen on my audibles.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
For sure. Well, you've been a pleasure. This has been delightful. And I can't wait to see what's next. Thanks y'all for listening.
Thank you.